This episode is brought to you by The Venture Project. Venture Project is a business incubator and co-working space in the fabulous Osh Vegas, Wisconsin. However, we do remote consults. We also travel all over the country. So if you guys have a business idea or are interested in participating in the Venture Project community, please go to theventureprojectoshkosh.com where you can learn more about me and the Venture Project itself. Once again, this is theventureprojectoshkosh.com. Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast. I am your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me at aaronjarmstrong.com, or you can go to my Instagram account, aaronarmstrong33. Now, today's guest, we had Jesse Krieger. Jesse sits squarely at the intersection of publishing and promotion, having signed 2 publishing deals on 2 different continents and navigating the world of becoming a best-selling author twice. It has been his honor to work with hundreds of authors around the world to achieve their dreams of writing and publishing a book. In addition to being featured on over 50 media outlets for his best-selling book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, Jesse has been an entrepreneur his entire life and holds degrees from University of California, Berkeley, as well as National Taiwan University and Beijing and Normal University. This was a fantastic conversation because Jesse is the owner of Lifestyle Entrepreneur Press, a publishing company where he gets first dibs at some of the best entrepreneurial ideas in his arsenal because he's the one that's actually publishing these books. So we dig into some of those incredible things that have left an impact on him, as well as things that I thought were interesting that we could discuss and bring forward in this awesome Spark Notes episode of capturing a lot of the greatest highlights of entrepreneurial success habits and tactics right here. So without any further ado, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
And how do you take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of, and what is the plan to overcome that fear, and what is the plan to enact that passion?
We got Jesse joining us here from Las Vegas, and we're going to talk about Lifestyle Entrepreneur Press, his company, his story as kind of an unusual musician creative that moved into the world of entrepreneurship. But most importantly, we're going to discuss today some strategies you can take away if you're an aspiring author, thought about becoming an author, and how you can do it, and by coming up with some successful plans ahead of time before you decide to make that step to publish. So Jesse, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks so much, AJ. I'm really happy to be here and dive into this.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, hey, I want to hear a little bit about your story and upbringing because it's definitely different, I think, than a lot of entrepreneurs. You were actually a musician, believe it or not.
Yeah. So, I mean, from an early age, like 13 years old or so, my dad got me a guitar, a Fender Stratocaster, and he had like played growing up and just played for fun, like around us, my sister and I. But once I got that guitar, I just knew. I was like, this is it. I'm in love. So fast forward a few years in high school, I'm ditching school to play in my bands and do guitar and so forth. And one thing led to another. I just was very clear I wanted to be in a rock band and play guitar, like travel around. So after high school, I moved to LA, went to Los Angeles Music Academy. And at that time, like 18 years old, we had to pay clubs on the Strip or on Sunset to let us play, get a black X on our hand. And we had to like sell 20 tickets or more, or we'd pay them. Like this crazy incentive. And that'll be important when I like bring this story full circle. But after that year in LA, there was 80% of the student body was international. So I started to get to know people from India, Japan, Germany. I was like, wow, it's a big world out there. And so after that year, some friends from growing up had invited me to travel Europe for the summer. I was like, all right, I'm in, let's go. Traveled in hostels, brought a little backpacking guitar. I ended up meeting another American who had been playing guitar on the streets and in bars for 7 months by himself, totally self-supportive. And I was like, is that even possible? And so that planted the seed. And when it was time to fly home, I skipped my ticket home. I decided to stay in Europe and take my chances, moved in with this American guy, Scott, in Vienna, Austria. And we began playing as a duo. And then we actually started to make a little money. And then we set up the basement of this student dorm to be a recording studio and started to record tracks. And that was what got me interested in like the production side of music. So to kind of like compress a really long story here, I moved from Europe to Nashville and went to audio engineering school. And that's where I met my bandmate and my first business partner, Jake Harsh. We moved in together. We got a place on Music Row, like 21, 22 at the time, and just recording, writing, producing 12 plus hours a day. And I was in heaven. We were working with R&B artists, rock, country, and we turned our like living room into a studio. We were writing our own music at the time and starting to play out and perform. And eventually came to this point where we're like, okay, we can either sign with a record label, but that started to look a lot like a job where you're giving away creative freedom, obligated to certain things. Or the other path was start our own record label and basically be in charge of our own music career. So my first business, my introduction to entrepreneurship was convincing my bandmate that we should start our own record label and I'd handle all the business stuff. He went for it and true to his word, made sure that I handled all the business stuff. Got together like some mentors, some advisors, just hustled as hard as I could. And we ended up raising around $100,000, which allowed us to record our own album and hire a team and get a booking agent. Ultimately started to tour around. And as it all culminated, we were on tour with our music on like 300 radio stations. We had some songs on MTV. We came from Nashville, Tennessee, touring to LA. And I remember it forever, AJ. You know, I came back to LA and we played across the street from where I used to pay to play at 18 years old. Now 22, 23, headlining a club on the other side of the street on Sunset. And it was this coming full circle of like really experiencing, having the dream, not knowing how it's possible or how it could even potentially work, to figuring it out and ultimately getting to celebrate that little milestone of like actually having our music out and a record distributed and touring the country. So that was my like introduction to entrepreneurship. But somewhere in that process, I was like, there's no way I can see myself doing this when I'm 40. And that opened up an existential question of like, well, if I'm not doing the only thing I ever wanted to do, what the heck am I going to do?
You know, there's a lot of good kind of takeaways, I think, in just that story, because I always say to some of my musician friends, I'm like, it's not necessarily about the most talented musicians specifically. It's about how you can run yourself as a business, which is like what you did. I think we have this misconception that raw talent without any strategy works. I don't think that's necessarily true in anything, whether it's a sport, whether it's music, whether it's entrepreneurship or whatever. It takes a good strategy. And I think that's why your story is a little different. It's like you had talent, but you also had a great strategy, which turned in this kind of music into business. But you always looked like you were applying this business lens to everything. And as my grandfather said, everything's a business. And I think that's a great way to start to look at life. And it seems like what you were kind of realizing at that time in your life.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It makes me think of another quote from the artistic perspective. Andy Warhol said, "The best art is a profitable, well-run business." Something to that effect. But it speaks to the point, something I still hold very near to my heart is operating at the intersection of creativity and commerce. And I think that's a fun place to play. Like you said, raw talent, I think, can only take you so far. And gosh, I've met virtuoso musicians that could run circles around me on the guitar.
Yep.
But aren't willing or don't want to or just won't learn the other parts of what's necessary to have a full career with it. And of course, that is a recipe for the frustrated musician or the starving artist archetype, is someone that's really good at the creative part, but just can't be bothered with anything commercial. But the blend of those two, I think, is where the magic can happen.
That's such gold right there, is the intersection of creativity and commerce is really, I think, a great way of looking at it for that exact reason. Think about, even like a movie that you might like. We all know the ones that win all the awards that are super well done and shot perfectly and all this stuff and have beautiful storylines, but nobody watches because they're just so creative and so weird that
and they're at like some obscure film festival with like
right.
30 guys in hoodies versus a box office smash with,
just crank out another Marvel movie, man. That's all we want. And you just throw enough special effects and stuff in there and people are happy. But I was always impressed with, in the movie example, like someone like Chris Nolan, the director of the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, all those types of things that took kind of like multiple levels to his stories. There was the creativity side that was like, this has got a really intricate plot line, or this has a really detailed, complex storyline. And then there was also like enough fireworks and flames to keep it entertaining. I think that's another example of what you're talking about as the intersection of commerce and creativity.
Yes, that I agree with wholeheartedly. And take that concept forward into the book publishing and what I've been doing mostly for like the last 7-8 years. What I see as a differentiator, like writing a book similar to a song or to a movie, the best ones that make you think, they cause introspection, they shift your perspective. That's a very intentional thing in my view. That doesn't just happen on accident. That's the real kind of pinnacle of creativity, to go beyond just an entertainment experience and to help transform somebody's life to some degree as a result. Many of us probably can think of a song or a few songs that when we hear it, it takes us right back to that moment, or a movie that brings back a special memory. And likewise, a book that you've read that perhaps really impacted and changed your life. So I think of it as like, that's the game I'm playing. I like not swinging for the fences, but aiming high and setting a bar where we're producing something that can have a real impact and a transformational effect on, as well as being entertaining and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you're almost giving some bounds to creativity. I have a model I use with entrepreneurs when they're getting started, and I talk about this on the show all the time. So like frequent listeners are probably annoyed with it, but it's strengths, passions, and marketability. And I think there needs to be an intersection between all three of those. Something you're really good at, something that you're really excited about, and then something that's also marketable. And I think all three of those need to align one way or another to be able to really make it work. So, I mean, I think those are certainly strategies that people can employ. So tell me a little bit about when you were talking about the intersection between creativity and commerce, is this idea of great films, great movies, they have multiple layers to them. The 4-chord song still just satisfies all of us, right? No matter how many jazz musicians want to go play random things, it's just for whatever reason, we still have this ability to come back. And you were talking about how you play in that space with the idea of coming to publish or in business. And I was kind of talking about this framework that I like to use where it's, what are your strengths? What are your passions? And what is marketable? And that helps me kind of control a new idea to see if this is something that you can really take to the next level. Is the talent there? Is this something that you're excited enough about to put the energy behind? And is this something the market's going to want to pay for?
It sounds like a good filter to run ideas through and get a sense of which ones you may want to pursue. It's like, if I think about that intersection of creativity and commerce in music, it's what creates an emotional connection with the listener so that they want to know more about the musician's life and want to know more than just playing the song on repeat. So that intrigue and the relatability. Music is such an emotional medium. If you have a song that touches somebody on an emotional level, that creates a strong bond, which I think is the basis for a sustainable career in music with enough people. But like, if I think about it with literature and with a book, somebody maybe 10 years ago shared with me the different levels of learning, and it stuck with me. Like at the base level, you've got theory, and teaching a theory, teaching the basic concept, that's like the lowest level in terms of it's the broadest. There's the most content out there that's theory, but it's also the least valuable, which helps explain why like school teachers are so low paid, right? Because they're teaching theory. But if you go up a level, you've got training. And training is helping somebody get from point A to point B. I'm going to help you start a new online business in the next 10 weeks, guaranteed. That's training. And that's more valuable because it's outcome oriented. But above that, even more rare on this pyramid or smaller amount of content applying to this is transformation, where you're helping somebody change an aspect of their life. And on the other side of it, they're a different person. That's even more valuable than training. And on top of that, at all, the capstone is something that's transcendent, or where you move beyond your point of view and you evolve in a way to a higher level of being. And if you can hit all of those, theory, training, transformation, and a little bit of transcendent experience, then that's one way to think of like covering a spectrum of learning styles and content delivery that can really just wow people and make a deep, resonant impact with one's book, because it's not just theory. It's not just training like how to. It's not just personal development like transformation. And it's not just inspirational like vision, future oriented, but it's a combination of all of those that delivers quite an impact.
So, for example, people listening out there and me, myself, how do you start? Like, where do you start with deciding if I want to have a book and touch all these different layers that you just mentioned? What do you usually recommend if someone's like, I got an idea, man? Where does it go from idea to vetting the idea to get it all the way to something that is going to be transcendent?
I use a little example from my book, but then I can give a general process approach as well. Predominantly, we're working with nonfiction books. So we're working with business owners, doctors, and people in self-help and personal development. So not fiction, not children's books. We're talking about nonfiction books here. And the way that I find that to be most impactful is if you look at like, what is the mechanism you use to get results with your clients? Like if you run a coaching or consulting business, what is your process from when you sign on the dotted line with a client to when you've delivered that final outcome? And you think about what are the incremental steps that you take with that client to get them to that outcome. That can start to become an outline for your book. And each chapter is a distinct step in the process of going from that point A of where the reader is when they pick up your book to what they know, what they're now able to do, what their perspective changes when they finish that last page. So if you can think of this from a business or an operational or a health and wellness perspective, how do you actually help your clients? How do you help get a result for people and back into what is the outline for your book? And then you can ask yourself, where is the person at in their life, the ideal reader? What's going on in their world? How's their health? What's their relationship like? How's their finance? And you can get a picture for who is this person that's picking up your book and who's drawn to it. And then you also look at, well, what's the end result? What result are they accomplishing? What's an outcome? What's a difference in their life as the end? And the book becomes a bridge between that before state and after state. And each plank on the bridge is a chapter or one discrete step in that overall process.
It reminds me of like what we do when we're marketing here at the Venture Project to other people or create marketing strategies. It's kind of funny because it's in a lot of ways similar to what you're talking about, but I call it the inverted pyramid. And you want to start with something really technical to where someone thinks this is all that you do, because for whatever reason in marketing, people only want to buy something if they think you're the absolute technical expert in this only thing. But the fact of the matter is, CEOs run companies and the C-suite is business people. It doesn't matter what the product that they make. They don't need to be an expert in the technology of the product or whatever, because they're just applying general business principles. And most of the time, that's the case when it comes to business consulting. It's like, these are just business problems. But you think the problem is that you don't know how to run a Facebook ad correctly. And in reality, that's the top of the pyramid, a very specific thing like that. And then you back it up into like, well, you're not running the Facebook ad correctly because you haven't done target market segmentation right. Well, the reason you haven't done target market segmentation right is because you don't really understand the 5 Ps of marketing. And the reason you don't understand the 5 Ps of marketing is because you don't understand core competencies of a business: marketing, engineering, operations, manufacturing. And the reason you don't understand that is because you don't really understand business. And boom, now you've walked him back almost from the reverse order of what you're talking about into the theory. And we have to do that all the time to market to people because for whatever reason, they're stuck at this very specific technical problem. And now we've got to walk them all the way into the problem is you got to get your theory right before you can go solve that problem.
It's really interesting, AJ. It makes me think of my own experience writing my book and how it mirrored that exact process. Like when my book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, Live Your Dreams, Ignite Your Passions, and Run Your Business from Anywhere in the World, started as a very dry how-to book on like how to run an online business that dropships products from China to the US. That's pretty narrowly focused.
Yep.
I was like, I know exactly how to do this. I should put it down into a framework and then be able to like share it with other people. So for me, that was my step one, was like, okay, here's how to go from idea to a functioning business that deals with a certain type of products in a certain geographic context. But then when I worked with my first publisher, I didn't self-publish my book. I signed 2 different publishing deals, first in Asia and then in the US. And I got some great advice in that process to tell the bigger story. Instead of just, hey, you've been thinking about starting an online dropship products business from China to the US? Well, I've got your book. That's going to talk to like this many people, right? But as we explored it, they said, well, you've got some interesting life experiences. You have an interesting philosophy on business generally. Why don't you tell some of those stories and give a more broad approach than just this narrow focus? And thus, it expanded out to become a collection of stories and featured 7 other people that were making over $1 million each in an online business while traveling the world, and painted a picture of what's possible overall in the first half of the book. And then the second half, we got into those details, but it was like pre-framing, setting the stage, accounting for objections, different stages of life, different competencies. And then we got into the really tactical how-to. Funny thing, AJ, is as an entrepreneur and as an operator, I thought most of the feedback would be like, I'm so glad he gave me a step-by-step framework. The majority of the feedback was, wow, I didn't know that you could run a business and travel 4 months of the year. It was like, ding. And paying attention to the market, right? Paying attention to what people's actual feedback is instead of having blinders on and be like, here's what I want to say, and this is how I want to say it. So always shifting back and forth between like, well, what does somebody actually think that sees this, experiences it, and creating a feedback loop that informs the final product, I think is an important part of it too.
Just like kind of from a technical standpoint. So it's like you want to start a book, you want to write something, and you kind of talk about this kind of process. You want to take the reader from their initial problem, but kind of pull them through to a bigger story. But what do you think about like topics they should select, or genres, or titles, or all the things that go into what someone who isn't familiar with the publishing industry thinks it's all about?
My honest answer to that is I don't really view it as my role to tell anybody they should write a book. I could answer that 50 different ways and it would be applicable to 50 different people, but I try and more be responsive to like somebody says, I've had this vision, I've been chipping away at it, but I haven't gotten real progress and I feel stuck. Like if somebody's already approaching it and has an idea, then it's very easy for me to unlock their potential. But if someone's like, hey, I've always thought of writing a book, like, what should I do? Sorry, I'm not going to tell you what kind of book to write. I'm not saying that to you. I've learned through experience that it's planting a seed for disillusionment. If I'm like, hey, you, AJ, you should write a book on this. Oh, you should really do it, man. It's going to be awesome. And then you dedicate the next 6-12 months of your life to it, but it never really resonated with you because I said you should do it. Now you go down this rabbit hole. I'm just kind of like giving an example of why I try not to give that kind of advice, because I rather see like what's possible with your book. Well, if you do go through the process of writing a book and speak to a specific audience, then the people that discover you through reading that book are going to know you specifically for the value that you've provided them. And in turn, people will meet you and get to know you through the stories and strategies that you share. And that will lead to people being a potential client with no sales process. Somebody reads my 180-page book and says, I want Jesse to help me launch my online business. Well, then now they're saying, hey, can you help me launch an online business I can run from anywhere in the world? And that's talking through like the right way of like, what could I help people get results with? What do I want to create training and resources and support to help people accomplish a goal? And then building a customer journey of sorts that helps take people through and support them through. In my case, it was launching an online business, and I had an audio training at a weekend seminar I taught called Business in a Weekend. Then I had a high-end one-on-one consulting where I'd work with somebody for 3 months. The deliverable was at the end of 3 months, you've got an online business selling a product that or a service that you're passionate about that's structured in a way where you can run it from anywhere. So it's kind of a roundabout answer, but if I were to sum it up, it's like the promise of the book can be fully delivered on with the high-end service offering that accompanies it. But a self-starter could read the book, implement, and get the results on their own. But then there's a spectrum of support in between for whoever wants it.
I mean, I suppose that's how everything is, though. You go to a university and you buy a textbook, and the textbook alone can get you quite far, can get you basically everything you need to know. But you still have a professor that's paid, that supplements it with additional information and context. And you still work with that person to kind of make it applicable to examples that might be relevant in your field. And I think that that's kind of the same business model applied in a lot of the things you teach. You have the book is kind of the top of the funnel. Like you can look at the book, reread it a couple times and get most of the stuff you need to know. But if you want to work with the author and get access, because a book is still limited information, where an author is unlimited information, you can still get access to that with some other additional offerings. You're almost treating the book as a piece of the funnel, if you will, for readers to kind of supplement the business that they're working with.
You got it. And I think that was well said, because in my view, the book needs to deliver and be able to stand on its own. And it goes back to that theory level, right? 10 years ago, I could take a Harvard computer science course for free on the internet. I could literally sit through a filmed version of an entire course at Harvard on computer science. Free. But you got to be a self-starter to take advantage of that.
Yep.
Then training would be actually taking the course in person, working in a cohort, doing a class project. Transformation would be getting hired or co-founding a company. And then transcendence is unlocking a new level of wealth as a result of all that totally changes your life. And that's just another illustration of like almost anything in the world is available for free if you're eager enough to go find it. But it's valuable to provide training courses, coaching, support, consulting, done-for-you services to account for the people that don't have the time, but want the outcome and have the budget. And that's where I think the total return on investment comes in. Not just money, but the time that's spent to write a book, go through the publishing and promotion process. It's an undertaking, right? But on the other side of it, you're positioned as, in the best case scenario, a foremost leader or a true authority in your field. And those people get access to opportunities that people that don't have a best-selling book on the topic do get access to, you see?
Yeah, it's actually funny. One of my mentors once told me the 3 Ps to getting, if you're in like a consulting business or clients or business, there's 3 keys. It's the 3 Ps. It's publish, podcast, and public speak. And it was like, because when you're publishing, you're becoming the expert, right? You have now these people that you cited your sources, your studies, demonstrated experiences, whatever kind of academic credentials that you've put in the book itself. And then you also, so it shows that you've done at least a pretty significant level of research to qualify you in this area of expertise. Then you have podcasting, like the same thing. You're coming on to promote your book or whatever as an expert in this because you've done so much research. So now you've researched, you've published it, you're an expert in it, you're going on podcasts. And then public speaking, instead of going to networking events or other events, you're at the top of the stage and you've got anywhere from 100 to 2,000, 20,000, 50,000 people looking at you as the expert now to build authority. And I think that publishing is great if you are willing to take the effort to study something to that level and deliver on the result. I think what I'm hearing you say, which is different, is that publish should be part of the bigger strategy you might have for your business or kind of like wealth building strategy or whatever.
I agree with, if you pursued a strategy of publishing a book, getting on podcasts and public speaking on that topic, that is premium authority positioning, right? If somebody listens to or sees our interview and then they pick up my book and then they see me speaking on somebody's stage, how much more credibility could I have, right? And
right.
That's not from an egoic level. I'm the guy talking about this topic across a variety of mediums and platforms. So that does result in authority positioning. And authority positioning is what allows you to command higher prices without being a hard sales expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being a better salesperson to convert more people. It's about enough people seeing and knowing that you're an expert in your field and wanting to work with you. And it inverts this thing where now you're qualifying, hey, are you the right fit for me to work with? Are you the right fit for me to invest 3 months in to help you launch your business? Are you the right fit for me to sign a publishing deal and support you for the next year until your book's out? So that's the view from the other side of being in a positioned or an authoritative state, is you get to qualify who's a right fit to work with you instead of go pitch and do sales meetings and try and convert people to be a client.
And you said something fantastic that it always irks me too. It's the idea of now you're justifying your prices when you start to position yourself as an authority. I mean, anything, you're trying to build credentials. A book can be a credential. It's an authority piece. You've shown that you've, especially if the more scholarly and academic and well-written and more thought you put into it, and the better quality of book, the more credentials you're going to have with it. Academic credentials, school, business credentials, results, and being able to tell those stories and being invited to speak places and being featured in types of articles with new, unique ideas over time justifies the price point. What really bothers me is when there's just tons of these entrepreneurs out there or startups or whatever, and they're just throwing prices up, which is, this is what it'll take for me to do it price. And the market doesn't care what it takes for you to do it. The market wants value and results delivered. And what I loved about your method that you had with your book was there's a deliverable at the end of it. It's like, you're going to have a business online that you can use at the end of it. Boom, a result. Like, people need results, sell results. If we all just worked on selling results, your business would take care of itself.
You know what's really funny, AJ, is I thought I was so smart when I had my book coming out that I had an audio training program and like a weekend seminar. But the real moneymaker was that done for you one-on-one consulting. And it came about by demand. In the introduction and in the conclusion to my book, I put my personal email address and I said, if you learned something from this book, if you're inspired, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot me an email and let me know what you took away from this. And wouldn't you know it, a few people were reaching out and saying, great book, I loved it. I was just wondering if I could hire you personally to help me launch a business. So literally to take them through the book, but make it personal to them. And that ultimately became a $10,000 offer, a 3-month, once a week for 90 minutes. We're going deep. And at the end of 12 weeks, you're going to have a business. So that was responding to what people actually wanted. And now I get it. Now I know that the highest price offering is the one where you personally take them through to getting that result. And
Done
that doesn't
for
have
you,
to
right?
be like, that could be a team supporting it, but delivering the outcome with the client instead of like, here's the book, take it and run with it, right?
Absolutely. I love that too, because I mean, that is the highest level of value. So that was something I realized probably 6 months ago. You know, I used to do coaching and stuff, and I called it soft coaching, which was where you kind of get the other person to do it. And then there's hard coaching or really consulting, where you're doing the work for them and you have deliverables and then you're just going to execute on it. Because I'll go to a seminar or whatever and I'll hear the guy talk about this. Now, you could try this out and Google all this. Like, look, what if I just paid you? How much would it be if you just did it and got me this result? You just give me a price and I'll figure out if that result is worth the price. And why can't everybody have that in their arsenal? Because I think the reason is because a lot of people can't get the result.
That could be one, but if there's potentially another, it requires a higher level of commitment, like on our part as the entrepreneur. I could write a book and then find a way to sell a bunch of books and sign people up for an online course that's evergreen. Now I can go do my lifestyle thing. But if I'm like delivering a result, working with people to launch a business and providing hands-on support, that's a bigger level of investment on my part too. So I think some people are resistant to like putting that much skin in the game to vouch for the success of their method with their clients. But that's the game I'm playing. It sounds like we're similar in that respect. I'm all about the long term. Like if I'm signing an author for a publishing deal, I know that that's at least the next year of both of our lives going into this. And that's before the book comes out and then it's published forever. So it's very different than like, take my 8-week course and then go execute.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And, you know, if anything, I'm more confident that I and my team could get the result for you than I could talking to you and teaching you to do it yourself. Like I've done this, we've done these types of things, whatever it is. I'm actually way more confident that if you presented me with a problem and you had a specific result you were looking for, that we could get there if you delegated the power to me to make the decisions, because we've done this. If anything, they probably don't realize how much we really do know and how good we can really turn things around, that we need to do better at selling that. This
makes me think of something pretty important and pertinent to like the book publishing process. Is where I draw the line is we don't write books for authors.
Right.
A lot of people will ask me, do you have like a team of ghostwriters and stuff? That's not my game. Like there are other people that will do that. But what I'm passionate about is I can't facilitate a bypass for somebody. I can guide them through the process. It doesn't mean they have to write every word, but it needs to come from them instead of like me talking to them once or twice and then hiring a team to do a bunch of research and write something. Because at the end of the day, there's a disconnect between whatever we'd come up with and what that author may or may not align with around it. So I'm very much of the mind of like helping support creating the best work, the best book. Because when we do, then I feel like the author's super invested and excited in it. It really is their philosophy that's now documented in book form. And so while there's other companies that say, like, do a book in a weekend, like do a bunch of interviews, and then our team will write it and deliver it for you and self-publish it through your account. In a way, I feel like that can work, but it's hard to think of like enduring masterpieces and bestsellers where the author wasn't tactically involved in that process as well. That's my preference and perspective on it.
And I agree with you. Actually, I saw a publishing company that like for like $100,000 or something, they'll actually have an already New York Times bestselling author write the whole book for you about whatever you wanted. And then
at those price points, then I would slightly adjust my position. If you've got a $50,000, $100,000 budget, then yes, there are talented people that can create a great book. But if you're at that level, then you've probably got like an 8-figure business or more. And then you've actually gotten enough results for people where a professional team could mine that and create something good.
Right. You don't think about that. Usually, you and me are thinking about, well, I am a big believer, like with music, with creatives or whatever. I think the best stuff sometimes just emerges out of somewhere you don't know or something that's mainstream. I think there's a terrible bias in the world. You hear Pareto's law where all the success kind of goes towards the same kind of people or whatever. And it's like, for example, the Beatles will keep writing music and everyone still thinks it's good. And eventually it's good only because the Beatles wrote it, not because the music's any better or more unique. And that is the Pareto phenomenon that we just can't understand. Imagine if these indie bands that are in garages that are never heard are creating fantastic music that's never going to get out there. And what I love about your mission is that it's also connecting because of that rule, that you don't really write for other people. You're able to kind of discover these new ideas, which is ultimately what does change the world. It's these ideas that aren't vetted and thought about by the same top 20% of whatever, but they come from out of nowhere.
I got to be honest, man, that touches on something close to my heart. I love exploring the frontiers of knowledge and the fringes of society, because the people that have taken their life really far in a direction that may be something very foreign to others is also uniquely equipped to share their experience, their knowledge that's applicable to so many people that didn't have that kind of extreme life experience. So whether that's having an extremely traumatic upbringing that resulted in outsized success, or whether that's somebody exploring a health and wellness approach that's completely unconventional, but then find something that gets amazing results. I love finding those kind of stories of like who took it, who followed the rabbit all the way down the rabbit hole and came out the other side with something new, something valuable that people haven't really seen yet on a large scale. I see part of my job is to find those and amplify those stories and people. Instead of, I can't create that person, but I can find the people that have gone way far in a direction and gotten a crazy result. And part of my nature, because I'm one of them too, is I connect with those people and then we form our relationship. And then I can go to bat for them on all the publishing tactical items and, the logistics and business stuff.
It almost used to be with journalism in a lot of ways, was to go find these unique stories that just never are new and different and noteworthy. And the ideas or the stories themselves change our perspective or are fascinating or whatever, right? But it's something that's new. And how do you get new if you're just going to repeat a system that's been generated? So a New York Times bestselling author already knows what's going to sell, already knows exactly what to say, already knows exactly what to do. And they know the system, they can get it done, boom. But how are you going to get like those new ideas that come out and just emerge and change the world?
You nailed it, man. It's like, I lament the near death of journalism. I don't see originality in reporting as I felt like I used to 20 years ago. But now when I look around at the news and things like that, and even magazines and pop magazines, it seems to be like an echo chamber of pointing to 5 other people said this. And so here's our take on it too. which is very different than like investigative journalism, which is more like what we were talking about of like digging through the muck to get the real story. I fancy that that's kind of what I do in the publishing space of like, where are the outliers that are kind of like standard deviation or like 2 or 3 deviations from the mean. And as such, they have something valuable that can be brought back to the larger body of people if it's positioned right as a book and if the whole package is there. So in a way, I see like that tradition of investigative journalism being part of my approach to who I really like build relationships with and publish in the best case scenario. And that does result in bringing new ideas and fresh perspectives to the market. And I think that's perhaps more valuable now than any time in my life so far.
You're almost like an information explorer. You kind of go out there, discover new territory and bring it back and let people, hey, there's this uncharted area.
Yeah. And it's a continuation of what I did that resulted in my own book. We talked about my music part of my career, but in between then and publishing, I founded, co-founded different businesses, traveled, learned other languages, and people were asking, like, what is your approach to life? Like, what are you doing? Seemed so disconnected being in one type of venture to another, and now China and whatever. I tried to harness what were the common themes or the guiding principles became part of my book. And I guess that's what resonates with other people that have like gone the distance in exploring a certain avenue of interest and now have something unique to say on it.
I have 2 questions before we wrap up today. The first one is, what's your advice to the people that are chipping away at a book? Like maybe they're stuck, maybe they can't quite finish, maybe they don't have the discipline to finish. What's your initial thoughts on just the actual execution of it, getting it done?
I would say that consistency wins the day, whereas a flash of inspiration or an all-night writing session, but then you don't write for 2 weeks, an intermittent experience of writing. But if you're consistent, even if it's 15, 20 minutes a day, 3 to 4 times a week, then you will make progress. And more so, your subconscious will get on board and you'll start thinking or not even know you're thinking about what you want to say next. So if you're consistent in the process, it's like you start attracting in the ideas that will help you on that next session that you're writing. So if you're committed to the process, it's like another part of you unlocks and now you're getting a wind at your back. And when you sit down to write, best case scenario, you're not warming up. You already know like, oh man, today when I have my writing session, I'm going to dive right into this and get into it. So that's one piece. The other is, if you want to be a professional, if you want to be a best-selling author, you've got to treat this with a professional approach. If you think of a baseball player, a basketball player in the NBA, they don't play when they feel like it. They play when there's a game. They go to every practice, they put in the reps, and then they go and have the big public experience. So you can adopt this approach by being consistent and treating it as if you're trying to get a promotion on a job or as if you're trying to get an A on an exam in graduate school. Take that same approach that you're creating something, you need to bring a level of excellence to it. And just that alone will start to open up like a new perspective you can write from.
Wow. I think that's great advice, especially for the people that know anything about how success is done. It's about chipping away at that thing, right? Just chipping away at the rock, showing up to the gym every day, showing up to the book every day.
Just to drive the point home, like if you're a pro, you don't do it when you feel like it. You do what needs to be done. And then you get to feel good when it's done.
Yeah, I love it. And I actually just started that Michael Jordan documentary. Finally, a year and a half later, I freaking love it. Just motivates me. But it's that same mentality.
He had conflict with so many people because he was so focused and intense.
Yeah.
That was a man about excellence.
Yeah. Just the consistency, just the confidence, just the laser focus is just unbelievable. And you see that. And I think that to your point, you want to be a professional writer, well, treat this like a job then. Like treat it like something that you show up to every day. And if you don't want to make money on it, well, if this is just something you want to do on your bucket list, okay. But if you want to do something seriously, put some time aside and do it.
Yeah. And just to kind of bring it full circle, like at the beginning, we said this is for a nonfiction book to help build your business and establish your personal brand. If you want to write your memoirs or a fiction book, it's a different approach. You can take a different tact. But like if you're doing a book to build your business and position yourself as an authority, you need to take it as a professional, and then other people will take you as a professional as a result.
My final question for you, Jesse, is where can people find you? Where can they get a hold of you? And do you offer book consults with other people as well? Or what do you do?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. And if you made it this far, thanks for listening. Hope this was valuable. You can check out lifestyleentrepreneurspress.com and you can Google my name, Jesse Krieger. I've done dozens of interviews. I've put a lot of training out there that you can access for free. If you resonate with this approach, you want to explore publishing a book, go to our site, submit a publishing consult request form. Myself and my team will review it, and we'll get on a call and explore what publishing could look like.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jesse, for jumping on the show today. You guys are listening to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. Winners, people crushing it in life. Wallets, talking about investing, real estate, small business strategy, and Worldviews, the business philosophies and strategies to get there. So thank you so much again, Jesse. Everybody out there, be somebody.